How's the sound?
Sound is good.
Sound is good, ladies
Yeah.
and gentlemen. In my house today, the one and only Mike Ward.
Hey,
Thanks for being here.
thanks for having me.
That's amazing. Yeah, just a quick couple emails through Sebastien Bourgo,
Yeah.
and it's a leap of faith, and you showed up in my house in the
Exactly.
suburbs.
Yeah. It's a really nice neighborhood and close to Ottawa.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? You're just
Yeah.
10 minutes away, and you're in the forest. It
Yeah,
feels like.
yeah.
Yeah, I just fed the birds, so hopefully we'll get a bird.
Okay.
Some birds and the squirrels. We'll have about 14 squirrels out there in a couple minutes. Yeah, so you're in town.
Yeah. I'm doing Yuck Yucks all weekend. I stole your Friday show.
That's right. I was going to say last Friday at the end of the show, I said, we won't be here next week. And everyone went, boo. I had that part that didn't really boo. But I said, but next week, Mike Ward will be here. And the applause was deafening.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you've definitely got an audience everywhere you go. Is that
Yeah.
That's true?
Ottawa's always really been good to me. The cities I find that like me the most are the cities where there's a bit of French people, and those are the best crowds. When I get like here or Moncton, because English crowds have laugh better than French crowds,
Okay.
but French crowds clap and they go nuts. They're almost like black rooms. So
Yeah.
they're like black white guys basically.
And that's
And the mix of the two are really fun.
That's right. So you'll get French people and English people in the same room tonight?
It's really weird. Like last night, it was about half and half. But after the show, everyone that came up to me spoke French, and
Okay.
it felt weird doing an English show in front of French people.
And then speak French to them
Yeah,
at
and
the
then
end.
speak French to them at the end.
That is good. That's pretty unique. I mean, I took French immersion and like my whole life.
Okay.
Kindergarten. I was like a 1970 baby, so it started I think the year I was 5, and then I think it still continues. And took French immersion all the way up. Even in university, I took French courses, and I couldn't put 5 minutes together in French.
Okay.
And so I find it amazing that you can get up there and entertain and be a world-class entertainer in a second language.
I'm really lucky though, because I grew up. My dad's English, my mom was French. I grew up both languages.
Okay.
And I went to English school, but when I try to learn a new language, I'm not able. Like even just. I was in China last year, and I just want to learn thank you and hello. Like I was like, if I know at least hello and thank you, people will think that's nice. And it's hello is ni hao, and thank you is xie xie.
Okay.
But I'd mix them up. So I'd get places, and I instead of saying ni hao, I'd say xie xie, and then they'd look at me, and then they'd bring me my plate, and then I'd say like hello, and then I just looked like a special needs man.
Well, you have
just-
that look to you anyways.
yeah. I got the big, kind of Down syndrome face. So
So, an English father and a French mom this is Quebec City?
Quebec City.
So
Yeah.
born and raised in Quebec City?
Born and raised in Quebec City. Yeah.
And did you go to like an English school there?
Yeah, I went. All my education was English. There's a small Anglo community in Quebec City, and but most of us are bilingual because you have to speak French if you want to go like to the store. Or it's really hard. There are some people that only speak English, but it's hard. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything.
Okay, so then, but you started your career in French.
I did. I started doing stand-up in English early 90s.
Okay.
And then I didn't even know French comedy existed, or I knew it existed, but I looked sort of, I thought French comics were kind of like a Bumblebee Man in the Simpsons, like funny costumes and jumping around and stuff. But then when I saw stand-up existed, I was like, I'll try it in French. I tried it in French, and I was like, in English, I was, opening on weekdays, and one club in Montreal, the Comedy Nest, would give me like 10-minute spots on weekends, but in French I was already getting like headlining gigs. So and then I thought I'd do both, but I was just getting too many shows in French, so I quit English. And then about 10 years ago I started back up
In English.
in English.
Okay.
And it was really weird because I had like a good French career. And when I started doing shows in English, I was like really, really nervous. But the experience kicked in as soon as I got on stage.
A completely different crowd too, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
And it was just, I want to see if I was like, I was at a place in my life where I want to see if I was funny for real, or I was just funny because these French people knew me. And that's why I started traveling, just to see like, okay, I'm funny here. Can I be funny in England? Can I be funny in, wherever I go?
And how'd that work out?
So far, I've been funny everywhere except for Spain.
Really? Why
Spain,
not? What's going on in Spain?
Spain fucking hates me.
Is nothing funny in Spain?
I did a show. There's a festival in Barcelona. It's I wanted to open for like it's a multilingual festival, so they'll have shows like in Russian, in German, in Portuguese. And I asked them, I was in Europe. I was like, can I do like a 10-minute spot? Can I open for someone? And they were like, no, you'll be our French guy this year. So they booked me a show, and then it was the same day as the equivalent to like Canada Day or like the 4th of July. But there were tons of free shows outside everywhere. My show was €35 to come see me. No one knows me in Spain. No one's ever heard of me in Spain. The French I speak isn't the same as the European French. So it was just horrible. It was horrible. And they don't get crowd work. So whenever I talk to people, they'd get offended by my questions, and there was these two couples in front. So I asked the guy and the woman, I'm like, are you guys a couple? And they're like, no. So I asked the guy, are you with that guy? And then he gets offended by that. So I'm like, okay. And then I do this show, and these people are just horrible. And then I do a bit about watching gay porn with my wife. Yeah. And it's a whole thing about not being homophobic. As soon as I finish that bit, he stands up and he goes, I'm gay. And then he goes, je suis gay, voilà. Like he came out of the closet during my show. It was the weirdest thing. And then I felt like he liked me, but then I started asking him questions again, and I lost him again. And it was just the worst. It was the worst show. Like it was a fairly big room, like let's say a 300-seat room with maybe 20 people, and 20 people that hated me. The only guy that liked me there was one Spanish guy, and he didn't speak French or English, but he was there with his wife. And he, after every joke, he was the only one that was smiling. Yeah. And that was really weird. When you've been doing comedy for 20 years, and like when you're starting out, sometimes you're like, no, I think I can get him. But I knew there was nothing I could do.
And you had to go on for how long?
I had to do an hour.
An hour?
Yeah, which is long. Doesn't seem long, but an hour of basically sucking dick on stage.
And there was 20 people, you said, in the room?
Yeah, about 20 people. 20 people, and they were all angry that they had paid, and it was horrible.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it's good for a guy who doesn't have that happen to him very often.
Yeah,
happen to him, right?
It's good. Yeah. It's good for the ego. Like it keeps the ego in check. Like no one. It's impossible to think you're the best comic in the world for after that. Like for 5 years, I was nervous. I still probably get nervous on stage because of that show.
Really?
Yeah.
In the back of your mind, it's like, do you remember Barcelona? Come on, Mike.
Those shows, though, I think, like, especially when you're starting out, shows that don't go well, those are the shows you learn from. Yeah. And even as you get older, those are the shows that I think you get better as a comic. Like, I did a show last year at Edinburgh. There's this thing called Late and Live, and they boo comics that they don't like. But no one had told me that. And it's part of the thing. Like, there's a documentary with Hannibal Buress. Okay. And you see Hannibal go on stage. He gets booed, and then he goes like, fuck you, and he leaves. Mm-hmm. And I had seen that, and I was like, that's rough. But I didn't get that was part of the show. So I go there one night. I started doing my thing, and I had done like 4 or 5 shows that day. And people started booing me. And I generally, people either get off when they get booed, or they try to win them over. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do like either of those. I was just like, okay, you guys don't like what I do. I'm going to do stuff that you like even less. So I was doing, like, I saw that they were getting offended by everything. So I was doing stuff just to offend them even more to see.
And they loved it.
Yeah. No, they hated it. They really did. But then I did my full time, got off. Yeah. And then the comics in the green room were like, why did you stay for so long? Like, why? Because then the 2 comics after me got booed, and he just left. And I was talking to Jimmy Carr, the British comic,
Yeah.
and he was like, "You got to go back." And I was like, "I'm not going back to that place." He goes, "You have to go back, because if you don't go back, you're just a shitty comic that got booed off stage. But if you go back and win them over, then it's a story." And then, so I went back the next night, and then I killed, but it was weird because I was doing material that I knew that those people would like, and I killed. And at the end of my set, I wasn't happy because I was like, you know, I came back to win these people over, but I hate these people. So what am I doing? I'm a 44-year-old man trying to make people that hate me like me. Like there's something. I got off stage. I was sad for like 2 days. I was like, "What's wrong with my life? I should have become a lawyer and accountant."
Yeah, question your life trajectory, your career trajectory. Yeah, at that point, I mean, in comedy, you question it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, you get off stage. How much of the audience are you trying to be friends with?
The thing is, like, I'm kind of dirty on stage, and my comedy is kind of mean. So I try to be like, I never bully, even hecklers. Like I'll handle hecklers, but in a sort of a sweet way.
Yep.
Just because I know that with my material, if I'm aggressive on stage, then I turn into a monster, and people are afraid of me. So it's just I try to be sweet, just so people don't realize that my jokes are really mean.
Do you ever drink before you get on stage?
I do. Yeah. I drink. I generally have. I never get drunk before I go on stage, but I generally have 2 drinks.
Have 2 drinks.
Yeah.
The best Mike Ward is 2 drinks.
Yeah. Two between 2 and 3 drinks. I'm really funny. More than that, it's not as good, and less than that isn't good either.
But it can get iffy when you have a second show, right? You've had your first 2 drinks.
Yeah.
And then what do? Stop drinking or keep drinking?
I generally like tonight. I'll have 2. I'll probably just have 1 drink before the first show. And then order another drink right before I go on stage, drink that one on stage, and then I'll have another one. So I'll have 3 drinks before the second show, which is nothing.
So Quebec City, your parents, what did they do for a living?
My dad was a farmer. He actually used to work for Bell Canada, and he hated his job. And he retired when he was 40. Like he was really good at saving money, and not like he was cheap, but not cheap. Like no one could tell. But he saved all his money. He retired when he was 40 because he couldn't have kids. And as soon as he wanted to be a farmer, so he got a little farm. As soon as he got the farm, my mom got pregnant with my brother and then with me. So
okay.
But he kept on telling us, like, I think that's why I became a comic, because when I was little, he told me, he was like, I had a job that I made money, but I hated.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a farmer, which there was no money in it. So he goes, but we still eat, we still, we survived. So do whatever you want to do. So when I was little, I wanted to be a comic. I became a comic. My brother wanted to be an airplane pilot, and he's a pilot.
That's amazing. Where's he a pilot?
With WestJet.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So does he travel around? WestJet flies around the world, or
no? They just do North America.
Okay.
But he's been there. Like he was one of the first 10 pilots that were there. When he went to WestJet, I'd never even heard of WestJet, and I thought it was like a small, little Cessnas. But since he's one of the first 10, he gets like really good flights. So he does Calgary, LA, and he does Calgary, Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So
they get paid a lot of money to fly around like that.
I'm not sure. I think he makes maybe 150-ish, 140,000.
That's
so
good.
yeah, good money. Because American pilots make really bad money. I was surprised that
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, if you get to travel the world and that's your job, that's pretty cool too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has to stay in Canada, so give him a little more scratch.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Good. For sure. So you're the younger of 2 brothers.
Yeah, younger 2 brothers.
And then when did the comedy start? High school?
It started right out of I knew I was going to move to Montreal to be a comic, because I used to think, because of the Just for Laughs festival, I thought Montreal was like the place for comedy in the world. So I wanted to move to Montreal, but I got into university, and I was like, I'll go to university, I'll get a bachelor's degree, and I'll do comedy at the same time. Okay. And I moved to Montreal. Every time I went back to Quebec City, my friends were like, so how's comedy? And I was like, haven't done it yet. And they kept on bugging me and hassling me. Yeah. And then one night I was drunk. I was like, it's going good. Like I told them I was doing comedy. They were like, really? Yeah. Well, you perform? And I was like, yeah, I do open mic nights at I'm at the Comedy Works every week. And they were like, really? Okay, what night? And I was like, they're Monday. And they're like, perfect, we're going on Monday. So I was like, oh, fuck. So I left the bar. I called the Comedy Works and I was like, can you put me on? I have like 10 people that are going to come up from Quebec City to see me. And they were like, sure. Because like the open mics in those days, like now the open mics do a little better. But in those days, there was like 4 people. So I was bringing 10. So I went in on the Monday before. I told the MC, I was like, look, I've never been here. I've never done comedy, but don't say that. Say this next guy is a regular, whatever. So the first time I went on stage, the MC was like, this next guy, you know him, you love him. Here's Mike Ward. And I went on stage, and I did really well. For one of the reasons was like 10 of the people were there just for me. So it was all like really almost inside jokes with my friends. Yeah. But I was like, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And then I couldn't go to school anymore. I'd go to school, but my mom had bought me in those days like a little tape recorder to record my classes. Yeah. But I'd be like, during the lectures, when the teacher would be talking, I'd grab my little tape recorder, and whenever I'd think of a joke, I'd say it in the recorder. So I bothered everyone, and I just quit school about a week or two after.
McGill?
Yeah, I was in McGill.
What were you taking?
I was just a commerce because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I figured business, I'm going to make money, and that way I'll be able to do something like comedy that'll probably... You know,
you could continue to put off that comedy career your whole life until you put it on the line, which is interesting because we often talk about telling people your goals, your dreams, and then they start your life starts moving in that direction, right? Put yourself out there and say. Because I remember the first time when I was in university, and the fact that I wanted to play in the NFL was nobody knew that, right? It was always a secret because I was afraid of failing. And until one time somebody, hey, where are we going to see you play next year? And I remember saying, for the New York Giants. And the second I said that, I felt the weight of the world come off. Like all of a sudden, and that guy kind of believed me. I'm like, wow, he believes me. Maybe I can do this. And then I had something to live for. And I remember running into that guy like a year and a half later. It was actually at a CFL game. I was going to go try out for the Detroit Lions that year, but CFL starts like 6 months before, right? So I went to, I got drafted by the BC Lions. So I was standing on the field during a Rough Rider BC Lions game, and that guy came down and he goes, you were right, you're playing. And that feeling was amazing. Yeah. Right? That's the same thing for you. I'm going to go to Comedy Works, right?
Yeah, there's something, it's true. Because everyone has dreams, and the difference between people that succeed and people that don't, or at least the people... people that succeed are the ones that at least try. Because if you don't at least try, you're never going to succeed. That I read a thing about like fat people. Like I'm a chubby guy, and generally fat people won't exercise because they're like, I look stupid, and I'm going to be slow. But the guy was like, even if you go out running and you weigh 300 pounds, you're going to be slow, but you're going to be moving faster than the fat guy that's just sitting on the couch watching TV. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's true.
That is true. Yeah. Action before motivation, right? You're never going to feel like doing it, right? Yeah. But when you start doing it, then that's when you start to feel like you want to be doing that.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing comedy?
3 years. I started in January, whatever that is, 3 years ago. Okay. For sure. Same thing. I always wanted to do it. I've been a motivational speaker for 8 years now. Okay. And my speech is I'll give you the. Do you know my speech? My story?
No.
Okay. So I'll give you the little elevator version for sure. You're a football fan or a fan?
Yeah. I like football.
Okay. Cool. So in 1985, me and my big brother Bill are sitting on the couch. Actually, literally like 500 meters from where we are now. He grew up over there. And we're watching the Super Bowl. Dan Marino's playing in the Super Bowl, his second season in the NFL. He's taking his team to the biggest game on the planet. And halfway through the game, my brother turns to me and he goes, you know what, Mark? If Dan Marino can take his team to the Super Bowl in only his second season, he goes, surely someday you could play in the NFL. So we set this dream. As you know, kids, I was 15 years old. He's older than me. And we went out to the local sports field and we practiced and we trained. And I'd only played 1 year of organized football at Gloucester High School down the street here. And then that next year, after all the working out and trying hard, we won some games, and then we made it to the playoffs. And the day was October 30th, 1985. Get into the game, have a great game, but we lose. After the game, I'm in the change room, and my uncle's standing there, and he goes, Mark, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your big brother Bill died today. See, he was born with a hole in his heart.
Okay.
And from a very young age, he was told that any day he, could be his last day, but he never let that get in his way. And he set a great example for me every day, and he lived life to its fullest. So on that day, I made a promise that the goal we had set together, I would never stop trying to achieve it until I did it, or till there was nowhere left to keep trying. And I mean, the next 10 years were filled with injuries and no success, but never giving up and just keep moving in that direction, and telling people what I'm going to do, and focused and goal setting, and just getting better all the time. And on October 30th, 1995, 10 years to the day of my big brother Bill dying, 10 years to the day of making that promise, I'd just done a workout for the Miami Dolphins, and head coach Don Shula goes, all right, Hatfield, why don't you go sit down inside? Somebody will come in to talk to you in a moment. And as I'm sitting there, sweating, trying to catch my breath from the workout, Dan Marino walks over and says, welcome to the team.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that crazy? So 10 years to the day. Obviously, I skipped a bunch of stuff in there to make it happen in 2 minutes. But yeah, so just never giving up on my dreams, and just learning from my mistakes, and just the inner drive to never give up, right? You take a horrible life event and you flip it around. You make it your motivator, your reason why that you want to achieve what you want to achieve. And I think if you look at everybody who's had some success, they've all stood on the backs of failure, right? They've all, because we look back and we see those things that have happened, we go, oh, that's the reason why that happened, and then that happened, right? But when we're going forward in life and bad things happen, we think, oh, it's not meant to be, right? It's not for me.
Yeah.
But obviously someone who's reached your success has seen like these terrible things happen and go, okay, I can turn that around. I can make that the reason why I get back up on stage.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm going to play, another gala, this, that, right? So I guess, when you look back on we'll start with your early career, and it was French that you started in comedy?
I started in English.
Okay, in English, okay.
And I was talking to a comic last year who told me, like, he had asked me, he asked me, did your first show go well? And I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then he said, I'm sure you bombed your second show. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I did. And he had told me, I think this happens to a lot of comics, that your first show goes well, and then so you're like, hey, I can do this. This is super easy. And then you go back on stage, and then it doesn't go well because you get on stage thinking, this is super easy. I can do this. But in your mind, you're like, no, I could do this. Like the other time it worked. So and then you just keep trying to do it. And the first show I did went really well, and then the next 20 didn't go well. Mm-hmm. But I was trying to find what had made the first show go well. And the real thing that made the first show go well, it was all my friends. Yeah. But then by the time I was able to get the laughs I had the first time, then I had confidence that, this is what I was going to do. And I was only doing shows in English. And then I'd met, I'd done a show in Quebec City for free in English, and the people in Quebec City, the Anglos in Quebec are either really, really young, mm-hmm. like, because everyone after high school leaves, and then they all come back like in their 70s. So I was doing a show, and everyone was in their 70s and 80s, and I was the MC. There was Bowser and Blue, and there was Lorne Elliott.
Okay, yeah.
And so they were each doing an hour, or I think Lorne Elliott was doing an hour, Bowser and Blue was doing 2 hours, and I was supposed to do like 10 off the top. And I get on stage, and I'm like 19-ish, maybe 18 even. I get on stage, and it's all like people in their 70s, and I start doing my jokes, and they're not working. People are getting kind of offended. And my dad, this was the first time my dad had ever seen me on stage. And he told me there was these old men that were like in the back going, we could get that guy off stage. And they were like, let's go on stage. But then they weren't sure if they were going to be strong enough since they were old and I was young. So they asked my dad, since he was younger, they were like, could you help us pull that guy off stage? And my dad was like, no, I'm going to let him do his jokes. So I did my thing. Didn't go well. Brought Lorne Elliott up. Then went off and told Bowser and Blue, they were like, how's the crowd? I was like, the crowd is shit. They're just horrible. They don't laugh. And then we could hear Lorne Elliott was just killing with every joke. He was murdering. He did an hour, got a standing ovation. I went back on stage to say, hey, Lorne Elliott. And as soon as I got back on stage, stopped clapping. And then I brought up, there was a little intermission, came back, same thing. As soon as I'd come on stage, they wouldn't even clap. They'd just look at me. So I didn't even do jokes. I said, ladies and gentlemen, here's Bowser in Blue. Same thing, Bowser in Blue, kills, standing O. I get on stage, nothing. They don't clap. So at the end of the show, Quebec City had destroyed like my confidence.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do this. And I had started doing French shows, so I was like, I'm just gonna do more French shows in English, and then I only did French shows for a long time, until I was doing a Just for Laughs gala, and there was Dom Herrera that was there, and he was celebrating the 25th anniversary of the festival, and the people at the festival, Bruce had asked me, can you stay with Dom since he's the only Anglophone on the show, because he didn't want him to feel left out. He goes, just like be his sort of chaperone, walk around with him. And Dom Herrera was super nice. He was like, hey, when are you performing? And I was like, I don't do shows in English. He was like, why not? And I was like, I just do it in French. And he goes, well, you should do it in English. If you do it in English, you can travel more. You can do. I was like, no, I will eventually. And then he was like, Bruce came by and he was like, Bruce, give him a gala. And then I was like, no, I don't want a gala. He was like, no, but give him a show. And then Bruce was like, do you want to do a show? I was like, give me the smallest show you guys have and I'll do it. So they gave me a little show at the Comedy Works, went there, did really well. And I was with comics that had done, Letterman, that had done Conan, and I was the one that got the best reaction. So my confidence came instantly back, even though it had been gone for like 10 years. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to start doing shows in English again. So I booked a show in Quebec City in English, just to, because I was like, I want to see those people that broke me 10 years ago and show them I'm funny. And then I did the show in Quebec City and it went really well. And then after that, I was like, I told my manager, okay, start booking me shows anywhere. And I didn't want to do, oftentimes if people, there have been a lot of French comics that had success and they were like, I want to do an English show. So the first show they'd book would be a gala or something that was really big. I wanted to start out like I had in French. So I did for the first couple of years, I'd just do open mic nights and I wouldn't even tell people I was famous in French because I didn't want special treatment or I didn't want anything. So I started doing a lot of shows in Montreal and then I decided to go to England for a while and just do shows over there and just to see if I could get laughs. In England, I got laughs. And the place that took me the longest to go was New York. For some reason, I was afraid of New York. And then when I went to New York, it went really well. And then after that, I've had, the confidence that you need to make people laugh, I think.
Wow. Yeah, you definitely need to have that confidence. What you keep talking about different parts of the world. Is that something that you did like on purpose? Like I got to go to different parts of the world to try this out?
And it's weird because I have this. I like traveling, and but I rarely go back to places. So I have like I'll do like let's say I'll go to Holland, do shows, and then it goes well, and then people are like, hey, you should come back. There's a club here. I'll book you there. And I'm like, well, no, it's kind of like on my bucket list. I've done already. I played in like 30 some countries. And the only countries I've been back to is France, Switzerland, and China and America. That's
amazing that to have the confidence to go to China and to do an hour is incredible. How do you is this something your manager takes care of, or is it?
It's a lot to do with social media. Like my tour, when I did my tour in China, there's a comic he's in Japan now, but a guy named JJ Walkrat, who's he's a Montrealer originally, and he moved out to China like 15, 20 years ago. And I got sued by the Human Rights Commission. And the day that I was in court, he heard about it. And then he used to run the Shanghai Comedy Club. And he just tweeted, hey, Mike Ward, you should come to China. We have more free speech than you guys do in Canada. Ha, ha, ha. He was just tweeting that out kind of as a joke. Okay. And he just for his followers, and then he put a link about my trial. But I wrote back to him. I was like, "Hey, if you can book a show in China, I'd definitely go." And then he felt bad about just booking one show, so he was like, "Okay, I'll talk to people at the Beijing Comedy Club to see if we can get a couple spots, and they ended up getting like I did I think it was a 10-city run. Like it was a fairly big tour of weird little places, and I like playing in like theater shows are fun sometimes, and comedy clubs are fun, but I like playing weird rooms that when you get there you're like, holy shit, how am I gonna make this work? Like there's a part of my brain that I don't know, I like challenges. So
how are they with English there? Obviously
it's
decent.
Yeah. Well, everyone that what was weird, like the first night I was there, I had trouble with my visa, and I got there. I landed at 8:00 at night in a town called Wuhan. So I had been on the plane for like 28 hours. I got off the plane at 8, and I was going on stage at 9. Okay. So like I barely had time just to drop my luggage off. And then when I looked at the crowd, it was half white, half Chinese, and I was like, okay, there are a lot of Chinese people. So but it was all white guys with their Chinese girlfriends or Chinese wives, and a couple Chinese guys that had been to America and then went back to China. So it was basically like playing any North American city. But people were more excited because they don't get comedy.
Right. They don't get people appearing there.
Yeah, they get it. Like they get the jokes, but they don't have comics that go over. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned the Human Rights Tribunal, and so how was that? Has that been a positive experience? I know it sounds ridiculous statement, but
no, it's like right now. What was weird when I got sued? It was the Human Rights Commission that brought me in front of the Human Rights Tribunal. So my lawyer had told me, he was like, "You're gonna lose. You're gonna lose. There's no way you can win because it's the people bringing you to court and the people judging you are both basically the same people." But he was like, "You're gonna lose that one, but then we're definitely gonna win the appeal." And at first, like I was like, I knew I was gonna lose, but when I did lose, it freaked me out. Like it was weird that being judged for a joke that I had written like 10 years ago.
Okay, well let's start at that point, because if people are not familiar with the case, then they have no idea what we're talking about. So 10 years ago,
there was a little boy that sang for the Pope, a little Quebecois boy who sang for the Pope. He was deaf, and he has a condition called Treacher Collins. And he was kind of like it wasn't the Make-A-Wish people, but it was a thing called Donner au Suivant, that it kind of basically the same thing. And his dream was to sing for the Pope. He sang for the Pope, and it was major news in Quebec because it was this little kid, singing for the Pope. And Celine Dion, like he came back. He was front page of everything. Yeah. Then Celine Dion, he sang with Celine in Vegas, and then he sang the national anthem for the Habs game, came out with an album, then a couple of years later came out with a book. And the joke was, I was just like, he like, why isn't he dead yet? That was the joke. And then I was explaining that he's unkillable. Yeah. And then I had this big long rant about how I tried to drown him and he can't die, he's unkillable and all that. And then that joke, I did that joke on a special, and then never heard about it. And when I went to court, I hadn't been doing that joke for 3 or 4 years. So it was weird defending a joke that I don't do anymore. Like, and not that, like I was trying to explain to the human rights people, I was like, I don't do this joke anymore. Yeah. So what I can't go back in time to erase the joke. So they just wanted money, and I didn't want to pay because I didn't want to be that guy that, paid someone because of a joke, so that every other comic after me now, that if someone doesn't like their joke, they'll be like, I want money, and you'll be like, no, and they'll be like, hey, well, Mike Ward gave that kid $80,000. So I wanted to fight it, and but it's been long, and we lost the first round, and now we're under appeal. Hopefully we're going to win that. And but if
it's not finished yet.
It's not finished yet. I'll probably get the verdict. Like I didn't know anything about the court system, so I used to I used to think like everything I know about the court system I learned from like Law and Order or like movies.
Boom, boom.
So I figured like the last day they'd be like, okay, will the defendant please rise? We find you guilty or not guilty. But I was in court in February of a year and a half ago, and then I got the verdict like 9 months later. And same thing, like now I'm under appeal, and I'm gonna get the verdict in. It's either between this summer and December.
They're just waiting to see if he dies, maybe?
So it's, yeah.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still alive.
He's the real winner in
yeah,
all this, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to die before he will.
Have you met him?
I just in court, And it was weird because people were, like, I never treat people with pity. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wrote that joke, because I didn't pity him. But in court, I had pity for him, and not because of his illness, but just I was like, how can you go through life not taking jokes so personally? Mm-hmm. And it was weird in court. Like his father started yelling at me that he was like, my son, everyone knows that when my son was born, he had water in his lungs, and you want to drown him. You want him to live through the same thing twice. Yeah. And I was like, okay, how can these people think that I knew that kid had water in his lungs when he was a baby? Right. Like when I was writing that joke, I was calling hospitals in Quebec City going, with any complications at birth? Okay, all right.
It's just all about the research.
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they've been through like terrible experience, right? Like, and their emotions are peaked and high, and they're making decisions that ordinarily they probably wouldn't. But so when this happens, like, how do you, like, you haven't done the joke in 3 years, so it's recorded somewhere?
Yeah, it was recorded, but even like it was, I put it out on a special. My special aired in movie theaters in Quebec. And then when we sold it to TV, that was even before, we had just gotten, the human rights people had contacted me. So when it aired on TV, we cut that part for the TV.
Okay.
Not just to... And it wasn't just to get in more trouble, because I knew that I'd eventually win. But I was like, I just don't want to look like the guy that's, continually picking on this little kid. Because I didn't do the joke to pick on him. I just did the joke because I thought it was funny. Mm-hmm. And then it went on the internet, and the person that uploaded it on the internet was the kid. So like people after, like often I'd get messages on Facebook going, it's on the internet. And I was like, the first time it appeared on the internet was on this kid's Facebook. And so that's why I never had it removed from YouTube, because I was like, he's the kid who's no longer a kid now. He's like in his 20s, but this kid, like he's milking this a lot. Like at first when I got sued, I thought it was funny, because I was like, it's funny going to court because of a joke. Mm-hmm. And then but he's really milking this. Like he's done shows because of this, and he put out an album, and he's starting to sort of revive his career.
Does he ever? So he never makes fun of this whole situation. Like, I mean, that'd be a gold mine for him, right?
No, the thing he did that was kind of making fun of it was he did a show at the Rockfest in Montebello, and he dedicated his set to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how'd you find that out?
I saw it someone sent it to me on the internet. They were like, he was like, I want to dedicate this to my friend Mike. Yeah. And he did a video. There's a French comic called Phil Bond, who's Philip Bond, who he had a commercial when he was selling tickets for his one-man show, and the kid was with him during the commercial. Mm-hmm. So the kid is kind of making fun of the whole court case. Mm-hmm. And then, but they even in court, they told me at first they didn't want me to be allowed to even talk about the court case, because I was doing a show my show in Edinburgh was called Freedom of Speech Isn't Free, and it was about the whole court case. And they were like, "You're not allowed doing that." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's in Scotland." Yeah. But they were like, "No, but we want to see what you're gonna say." And I was like, "No, I'm not gonna show you what I'm gonna say. It's another country." But they were trying to like not let me talk about that in Scotland. But this kid is in Quebec talking about it nonstop to everyone. So it was kind of weird.
That is shocking.
Yeah.
It's shocking that they think they have that much power.
Yeah, what's weird is they do, because I told my lawyer, I was like, they can't do that, can they? And he was like, your primary residency is in Quebec, so they have control over everything you do everywhere in the world. But I have a house in Florida, so I was like, I could make that my real house, but since I don't have my papers I can't live full time in America, so I don't know how that would work out.
Has this ever happened to another comedian before?
No, there was a guy in Vancouver named I think it was I'm gonna say Guy Ritchie, but I think that was Madonna's ex-husband.
I think so. Yeah. We could talk about Guy Ritchie too if you want.
But Guy Ritchie made a lot of really good movies. Yeah. No, this guy was I forget his name, but he was at an open mic, and he insulted these women in the audience, and then it escalated, and then he broke the woman's glasses. Like, okay, so, well,
there's some physical violence.
So that was that's the only other time that the human rights people have gone after a comic, but for him it wasn't like me. The kid had never heard about the joke, and there was I never met the kid, and so it was the first time that a comedian got in trouble for doing his job, basically.
Wow. And so, have you paid any money yet?
Not to the family, but it's cost me $150,000 so far in legal fees.
Wow!
But I was lucky. I had Just for Laughs organized a benefit for me, and they raised $20,000, and I had a GoFundMe that I raised another $30,000. So I'm out of pocket $100,000, and then supporters gave me another $50,000.
Wow.
But I'm lucky, that I'm in a place where I could do this and not go bankrupt.
Yeah.
But the whole time I was thinking about, well, what about the next comic? If this happens to someone else, like if this happens to someone, like if this happens to you, you're okay because you got the NFL money. But but if this happens to like someone that's 2 years into comedy and that's all they have, and they're making like $9,000 a year, they're so screwed. So the thing I wanted to do, and I'll do it, I just want to get my court case over. Yeah. I want to start a fund for whoever the next person
So you
is.
think if someone who makes $9,000 a year, this happens to them, then what happens if they can't pay? Like, maybe they're not screwed.
They won't pay for lawyers because they'll get like legal aid.
Who are, actually, the lawyers in this are the winners, right?
Yeah.
Forget the little kid.
Exactly.
So you're giving someone 100 and whatever grand.
Yeah.
That's the real winner in all this.
Yeah.
Maybe the underlying story. Maybe not even free speech. Maybe the legal costs.
Yeah. And my lawyer, like he's apparently the best lawyer for freedom of speech in Canada. But when he was telling me about. It had cost me $93,000 just the first part of the court case, and then he had told me, he goes, the appeal doesn't cost anything. We just file a couple papers, and it'll cost like between $3,000 and $5,000. So I go, okay. I go, yeah, let's appeal, and then a week later I get a bill for $19,000, and I'm like, how can, like, I get that you can, it's an estimate, because he told me, he was like, it's an estimate. I go,
it's probably an hourly estimate.
But like if someone comes to my house and they go, okay, I can chop down that tree. It's going to cost you like between $300 and $500. Okay. And then he comes back. Okay. That's $19,000. I'll be like, no, fuck you. But, no, it's just long and costing me way more money. But I guess like someone that if they were poor, they wouldn't pay the legal fees. And then I guess they'd have to go bankrupt. Cause I asked them, cause I was thinking about, like if I lose, just not paying. And he goes, I go, what happens if I don't pay? And then he goes, well, they'll seize all of your stuff in Canada, or not my house, but like my bank accounts.
Okay. In Canada.
So I was like, okay, but I'd have to move to the States. And at first I wanted to do as a goof, like,
you could be a refugee.
Yeah, be a refugee of like some horrible country,
oh my God,
like Saudi Arabia. Like move to Saudi Arabia, just as a goof, like kind of a fuck you to Justin Trudeau. But then I thought, nah, if I go to Saudi Arabia, I'm gonna die like the first day. So, but I think what'll happen if I lose the appeal, we'll try to bring it to the Supreme Court. Yeah. If we lose that, then I'll pay. But I want to get a fund for the next guy or girl that this will happen
That's
to.
a great idea.
And at first I wanted to make it like international and try to get like comics that have like real money, like a Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle type comic. But this can only happen in Canada because it's a Human Rights Commission that did this, and they don't. The only other place that has a Human Rights Commission is for the UN at The Hague, but they go after like war criminals and dictators.
Are you? Do you know if people like Chris Rock and those kind of people are familiar with this case?
Yeah, I don't know if Chris Rock is, but I know Bill Burr. Like when I met Ralphie May that died a little while back, but when I met him, he was like, "Hey, I heard about you. Bill Burr talked to me about you," and I was like fangirling. I was like, "Oh, that's so awesome that Bill Burr's talking about me to people."
That is awesome.
Yeah, so they heard about it, but they just think it's weird. At first I think they were afraid at first that when they came to Canada, they wouldn't be able to do their material. I don't think though it won't really affect. I don't think it, like, I was afraid it was going to affect comedy, but it hasn't, because I forget who told me, but someone was telling me, generally a comic, like if someone tells you don't do this, that's what we want to do even more. Yeah. So I'm happy, like comics, it hasn't seemed to change. I don't think it's my court case that sort of affected comics. What's affecting comics now is more like people on the internet getting offended over everything. It's a little rougher to do comedy now than it was like 5 years ago, I think.
How so on the internet? Like
just like with Dave Chappelle's last special, like that every bit that every comic does now. There's someone on the internet that explains why they shouldn't have done that and why they're shitty people. And so if you read, like, I stopped reading like pretty much everything people write about me because it affects you. Because at first you're like, who cares? But then if you read 20 people that tell you you're an idiot, then you start thinking you're an idiot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. There's something very toxic about social media. And I obviously did research on you, and I didn't see you very active in social media.
No, I used to be super, super active, but then I just stopped because I went through this. It was weird when the verdict came out, because at first, like, every time they'd write about me in America, it was always positive because they're like First Amendment and free speech is super important. Canada was kind of, some people were for, some people were really against me. And England, they were at first they were very pro Mike Ward, and then I got this backlash. People were like, because the story too, if you just read it, it's this successful comedian made fun of a disabled boy. So it makes me look like a monster. Like, it makes, whenever people say you should always punch up, not down, there's nothing more down than a disabled boy. So I get that. So I get that I looked like the worst piece of shit in the world. But yeah, so it was positive at first, then it became weird. And then I'd get like, I'd Google myself and I'd see, on my Facebook, I'd get insults in languages that I didn't know what they were. Like, I remember I got these insults. I thought they were Greek at first, but they were Russian. And I'd use like Google Translate to see what these people were saying about me. And then I was like, okay, so I'd Google myself and see, okay, they talked about it in some Russian paper. So I was like, this is very weird that I did a French joke in Quebec 10 years ago about a little boy who was famous in Quebec. And now there's a guy in Russia.
It's amazing.
Like, talking about me and judging me. And I was like, this is horrible.
And in Russia, they're judging you?
Yeah.
Like, I can imagine the people who are judging you, it's based on what you said, like the headline, right?
Yeah.
Rich, successful comedian. So is there any other arguments against you? And like you said, in Canada, some people are have the opinion, the opposite of what's happened here. And so is there anything more than just people knee-jerk reacting to that headline?
And it was very intense for about a month because there wasn't any war or terrorist attacks or here in Canada the hockey was like, there was no hockey because it was in the summer, so it was like it was a slow news month, so that's why they talked about me so much. And I was over I wasn't even in Canada. I was in Edinburgh at that time, and there was an article in a French paper, and the title was Mike Ward se met riche sur le dos de Jérémy. So it was Mike Ward is becoming rich on Jeremy's back, like that. So I was like, that's like a little much, because I was in Edinburgh and my show went well, but it was a 200-seater. So 200-seater, charging £10 per person, and like I had to pay like 4 or 6 people. So like I left Edinburgh with about $800 in my pocket, but in the article they were acting like Mike Ward is becoming a millionaire because of his jokes that hurt little kids.
Yeah. Do you think your career obviously more well known because of it?
Yeah.
So is that a positive?
It's weird. I'll see late. Like what I didn't like or what I don't like is the people know me because of that, and I'd rather people know me because of jokes than just being a mean person, a little kid. But I think it's gonna be like I want to put out a special this year, just so that when people Google me, they see comedy and they just don't see it like a court case.
That's right. I mean, I watched lots of your stuff in preparation for this, and it's very clever. It's very well written. What is your creative process like?
It's weird. A lot of comics, they'll think of something, do it on stage, and then if it doesn't work, they'll try it again. I lose confidence very quickly. So what I try to do is, if I think of something funny, and I'll actually write it out like I was writing, a novel. And then I get on stage and I do none of what I've written, but it's the same basic idea of what I wrote out. And then I take whatever works from that. And my best bits are bits that I never really wrote, that I actually wrote out, but if I read what I wrote and then I see what I did on stage, it's two different things.
Wow. So you write it by hand or on
a computer?
On a computer?
Yeah.
And then you go up and you just try and get the feeling of whatever it is,
the
spirit.
I sort of try to take the spirit of what I wrote and make it work on stage. But when I try to do it like actually like how it's written, I sound like a guy that's reciting a poem or something.
And if you can't remember it verbatim, you're like, pause. What's the next word, right?
Yeah.
Like a play.
Yeah.
When you can't remember. That seems to be sort of the way the best comics do that, for sure.
How do you write?
I write things when they happen on my phone, and then from then I sit down and I write it again. I think I have to write things by hand to get them to connect with my head. For sure. And that's
a lot of comics are like that too.
Yeah, I mean, I find if I write something out, like I can write it 5 minutes, and if I write it out by hand, then I can get on stage that night and do it almost verbatim, almost word for word. But if I type it out on my whatever device I have, it's not even computing into my head at all.
I had tried that last summer. I was like, I'm going to start writing by hand again. Because when I had started like 20-some years ago, I used to write by hand because I didn't have a computer. But I'm not used to writing anymore. So I'll be like at the second page and I have cramps in my hand.
You can't even remember if you're right-handed or left-handed.
Yeah, like it's,
That is funny for sure. Like when you got to go write something, you don't have the same what's it called? Manual dexterity. And the thing I try to do is I do like some comics that do both languages won't do the same jokes. Like a guy like Sébastien Bourgault, he doesn't do the same stuff. Well, he sometimes he does French and English, but he'll write stuff just for English or just for French. I try to, if I think of something, I'll do it in French and in English, and then often the bits go in different directions because I'll see like this idea works really well for French crowds, they'll get it, and but they won't get this, but then the English crowds will, and that's where I see that my brain is like really, there are parts that are French, parts that are English. Wow, isn't that interesting? Yeah, for sure. And that's just because you grew up that way, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
But like I was talking to I did a show with Eddie Izzard, who he does shows in French now, and he actually does shows in German too. Wow. And he learned both of those languages as a grown man. Like he was one of the inspirations too for me when I started doing shows in English again. I had seen him in an interview say he spoke French when he was little because in England you had to learn French. And then he did his one-man show in Paris, and he bombed, and it was horrible. And a normal human being would just go, okay, fuck France, and never go back. But he was like, the reason why it didn't work is because his French, he spoke like proper French, so he didn't speak slang French. So he was like, I have to move to France to learn how these people speak. So he moved to France for a year and lived with the French. And then he went back on stage, and then he killed. And there was a producer in the audience from Germany who was like, would you do your show in German, in Berlin? And he was like, I'm going to learn German. So the first time I met him, he was like, he had just said that he was going to learn German, which sounded like a joke, but he actually did learn German, and he did his show in Berlin. And he was telling me, and this is true, but I think some things don't translate. But he was like, if it's funny, it's funny. Yeah. And I think that is true. It's just the only thing that the only things that get lost in translation are if you name drop. Like if you do jokes about certain people. Like you could do a Trump joke, I guess, in any language, any country. People know who he is. But if you're doing jokes, even Justin Trudeau, who's like probably the most famous Canadian prime minister we've had in forever. Like in Sweden, they might not, they don't know his name, and they won't get half the references. But if you're doing jokes about your mom, your dad, your uncle, your family, your wife, your life, all those jokes translate.
That's incredible to think that they can do that in another language. My gosh, I couldn't even. I actually failed grade 12 French, and that's because I couldn't do it well enough, and here there are guys getting on stage.
I think though, like the best way to learn a language, I think, is once you learn the words, is going to see a comedy show, because that's when you see how people think. Like you and that's the thing that's like I'd love to learn Spanish and do shows in Spanish. But I don't think I'm ever gonna do it. But that's my like maybe I'm 44, so let's say that's my 50-year goal. Like by the time I'm or maybe no, like I'm probably gonna die way before that, so that's so by the time I'm 120.
You can do that for sure. That's a lot of years. If you just learn a few sentences a year, you can totally do it.
I have a friend that did a show in Colombia, and he just had a Spanish friend who his friend translated all of his jokes, and then he learned them like just he doesn't speak Spanish, but he just sort of repeated what his friend had said, and it worked. Like he showed me the video, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'd like to do that.
There is something too about someone who's trying, right? Like Sebastian, who gets up there, and you can tell that English has been like in his vernacular for like 3 years, and there's something that likable and lovable about that, right? That someone's up there trying. So maybe if you get up there and just hola, amigo, and, they're right there. That's funny, right? A giant fat-headed white guy trying to say things in Spanish is hilarious. Do you ever hold back on jokes anymore because of?
No, I did. Like the thing that I had another scandal years ago, and I realized whenever I'm in like trouble with comedy, if I write right away, I'll hold back, and then if I wait. At first I hold back, and then I get angry, so then I go too far. So I have to give myself like a 6 or 8 month period of time just to let me be afraid, then be angry, and then come back to normal. And now I'm just back to normal. Like now I'm writing jokes I would have written the year before I got sued.
Oh, I see. Okay, so what was briefly the scandal?
The first one was I did a joke about it's always about little kids too, so I should stop making fun of little kids. But there was a little girl that had got kidnapped in Quebec, and I did a joke about and she was like every day they were talking about her in the paper, and I owed money to the government, and then it was a bit about how the government had seized all my assets, and I was like, Revenue Canada are the worst. If you owe them $9, they're gonna kidnap your kids. They're the ones that have. And then I named the name of the little girl, which is a fairly inoffensive joke, got a nice reaction. It was during a gala, and I got, finished my set, got a standing O, got good reviews the next day in all the papers. And then like 2 or 3 weeks went by, and there was an article about a journalist that wasn't in the room who at first he wrote a thing about comedians that went too far during the festival, and then he didn't name the joke. He just said Mike Ward, who made fun of the little girl that got kidnapped. And then people got, like, at first they read that, and some people got a little offended. But there was a TV show in Quebec. The guy, the host of the thing, called this little girl's grandfather live on the air, and he was like, "What do you think of Mike Ward that's making fun of your granddaughter on stage?" And the old man was like, "Well, I don't think that's very nice." And then it started from there. So then people were like, "What a fucking asshole!" Yeah. And then I actually had people lined up outside my house. I don't know how they got my address, but they were lined up outside my house. My manager was like, my phone is unlisted, but my manager was getting death threats. Like, people were telling him, "We're gonna go kill Mike." And my dad, this was about the time my dad had quadruple bypass surgery, and the day that this happened, I had to take him out of the hospital. So I was afraid that in the car, like, I didn't want to tell my dad anything about this because I didn't want him to get nervous. But I was afraid that when we'd stop at a red light, someone would like try to break the window, and so it was very bizarre.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. What is it that is it just you, or does this stuff happen to other comics?
I think it's this is a very French Canadian thing. French Canadians, I think that's the thing I was saying, that I like, that they're an expressive audience, but they get excited rapidly, but they get angry rapidly. And plus I do a type of comedy that people had never done really in Quebec in French, and so they just get offended more easily than English crowds. Not everyone. Like the people that pay to see comedy shows, like comedy nerds, in French comedy nerds, English comedy nerds, are both exactly the same, but just the sort of, like we call in French, Monsieur, Madame, tout le monde, like people that never go see comedy shows, they get offended. And I think that the reason is, like, I do the type of comedy like let's say a Jim Norton does, but Jim Norton's material, you're not going to read about it in the paper. Whereas in Quebec, since it's a small market, comedy is super popular, they'll write about my jokes in the paper. Yeah. So then people that would never pay to see a comic are reading my jokes, so they're getting very angry. It's there's something weird about the whole Quebec market.
No, I won't say that. No.
What were you
I was just going to say something about French people, but that's your role in this, not mine. And so the girl, did they find her? Is she okay?
No, they found her. They found her body last year.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So many years later.
Many years later, yeah.
Oh.
And the guy, they haven't arrested anyone yet, but they arrested a guy last year, but I don't know what's happened to that guy. Like, I don't know, like Quebec. I don't know if he's in. He's probably. I hope he's still in prison, because you murder a little girl, you should.
Yeah. You
be in prison.
You should go to jail.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
That was Mike Ward who thought that too. I mean, if anyone.
But it's weird. Like the two. Like, I should stop. And I had actually told myself this seriously. I was like, I gotta just stop doing jokes about little kids. So I think that's the thing I gotta do if I want to, stay alive and not have someone stab me in the neck.
Has there been any death threats from the
recently?
controversy?
I gotta. It wasn't even. It was. I got death threats during the holidays, right before the holidays.
That's nice at the holidays.
Yeah. And I found out it was there's a comic in Quebec named Guy Nantel. He had done a joke, and he was like, got in a lot of trouble, and some guy threatened his life. And then the article was Guy Nantel gets a death threat. So I started reading the thing, and the death threat he made was like, "I'm gonna go kill you and Mike Ward." So he and cover the Journal de Montréal. You got Guy Nantel, who's surrounded like armed police officers escorting him to his show, and I was like, why am I finding out about the death threats in about the death threat in the paper.
Yeah.
Like there's someone should have called me.
Yeah, Guy
to
Natel
warn
should be
me.
calling you.
Yeah,
and maybe forward that email.
Yeah. And they went to this guy's house. He had both our addresses. He had a stockpile of weapons, and he when he went to court, he told the judge, I don't regret what I said, and I'd be willing to die for what I believe in, which I don't know what he believes in.
Yeah.
So they put him in an asylum. I don't like a mental. Do they still call them asylums?
They should. Yeah,
Okay.
Paints a picture for me.
But yeah, they put him in an asylum, and a cop wrote me. He was like, "Don't worry, this guy's crazy and he's dangerous." So we put him there for 30 days.
Yeah,
And I was like, as a joke, I wrote back. I was like, "Okay, so that means I have 30 days to buy a gun." Then ha ha ha. And then I read in the paper early January that he's still in that asylum, but just at night. So he's allowed going out during the day.
Yeah.
Because he can't murder someone during the day.
It's harder, I think, for sure. There's
so I'm
more
safe
sun.
from like 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. There's no chance I get murdered.
That's great. I should
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't have had you in my house. Mike Ward is not in my house. Is there some level? And then we had Glenn Foster on this podcast, and it was unrelated to you, but he said something like, "I would love people to protest." First of all, he goes, "I don't want people protesting my shows." And then he went, "No, I would love if people were protest." Is there some level where Mike Ward is kind of happy that this is happening?
Not the court stuff, but protesters I've always really liked. Like I had a couple years ago, I had protesters during Just for Laughs, Just for Rire. And there was the Nasty Show. There was Bobby Slayton hosting the Nasty Show. And then there was my show at Metropolis. And we kind of shared the same parking lot. So in the parking lot, there were people with pickets and signs and stuff. And someone was in the van with Bobby Slayton, and he was like, when he saw the signs, he got really excited. He was like, "Oh, this is amazing, this is amazing." Then he came out. Then when he saw it was for me, he was yelling at the protesters, telling them to fuck off. And he was like, "I'm way more dirty than Mike Ward is."
I hate little kids too. Come on.
But it was weird. It was one of those. It was kind of like it was organized by people that like it was one person that hated me. And then a lot of the protesters didn't even know who I was. Like Abdul Butt, who used to be on This Hour's 22 Minutes, went out and he was talking to them, and he was like, "What do you hate about? What do you?" Or no, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't Abdul. It was Adam Susser. Adam Susser was asking people, "What do you hate about Mike Ward?" And it was all people that didn't really know what I did. Yeah. Some of them were American and they had never heard of me before the protest, but I guess their Quebecois friends were like, "This guy," and it was they'd write jokes they had my jokes. This is, I think, one of the times it was one of the funniest moments in my life. There was this woman, she had a sign. It was a joke I used to do in the 90s, like an old joke. And it was, some people get into showbiz for money. Some people get in it to fame. For fame, I'm in it for the blowjobs. And she had a sign, and it was written that, and underneath it was Mike Ward. You know, like And I was looking at that going, that's the weirdest quote. There's something very funny about that.
Yeah, she didn't do her research. That's not really topical.
No,
I wouldn't think that it's the appropriate Mike Ward protest sign.
No, and she but I guess she was like thinking that treats women with like a lack of respect, but it's a blowjob joke.
Yeah,
like, it's a blowjob.
Oh, was it in reference to one of your jokes?
Yeah, that was a joke I used to do, like I had done somewhere like in the 90s, like
Oh, wow, that's terrible.
But
I wonder how much of these, because when you go to the G8 summit or whatever, and they have all these professional protesters, maybe the comedy circuit could start hiring sort of open micers to just protest things and get attention. Isn't that a great idea? Yeah.
There was one of those protesters that had a paint gun, and they were shooting at the bouncers at the Metropolis. So it was very like almost exciting. Like everyone inside was like, "What the fuck is going on?" And these women were like shooting at like these big dudes, and the dudes weren't doing anything because you're a guy that's like 6'8" that weighs 300 pounds. You can't slap a little woman with a gun.
Yeah.
Well, unless it's a real gun, but
a paint gun. Yeah. That is interesting for sure. That's I mean, there is obviously an excitement that follows you around. Is that everywhere? Is that especially in Ottawa? I would imagine there's an excitement.
But I think that like there's something fun about whenever something is you're not sure if you're allowed to laugh. It adds excitement.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm almost like a drug. Like not in a way that you get addicted, but just in a way that you're like
Bad drug.
Yeah, like someone told me there was someone from the CBC yesterday, and they were like, "It's funny because when I watch you do jokes that I almost feel guilty for laughing at that. I'm like, oh fuck, I can't believe I laughed at that. But there's because laughter, you don't control what you find funny.
Yeah.
Like even and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. That's I think people that don't like me or don't like my type of comedy try to make people that do like what I do feel like bad people. But you know, I see it as jokes are jokes.
Yeah.
Like,
If you can make someone laugh, that's happiness in their day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And if you make them think about an issue as well,
Yeah.
and then it's a plus, right?
Yeah.
How much is your comedy is about a message?
I try to do half and half.
Yeah.
Like I've noticed, if I try to like if there's too many messages in my things, I just lose people. And if it's just wrong or dirty, I lose people because then I'm a monster. So I try to do one bit that has heart or sort of a little moral, and then another bit that's just totally wrong, and then people. So you keep people guessing.
Yeah, that's
type of thing.
Is there any like goofy? Is there goofy? Is there you know what I mean? Like a silly one-liner that you're just throwing in there because it makes people laugh, or is it all about?
I don't have very many one-liners. I don't have very many one-liners, but sometimes like it's sometimes generally if I think of a one-liner, I'll do it and it works, and I'm like I'll keep that, but then I never remember it.
Yeah, it is harder to remember those.
Yeah.
for
Whereas
sure.
like I'm what I do is like I'm almost like I'm an old black comic, like you know, like what, let's say, like not as good as Richard Pryor, but like what Richard Pryor used to do. Like I like telling stories, or like what Red Fox used to do, or that's what I've always really liked when I was growing up. Was older black men telling jokes, and so I'm like an old black man in the body of a chubby white man.
It's funny as you said that Richard Pryor's looking over your shoulder if you look there. Yeah, because he's one of my favorites too. And that's been an hour and 12 minutes. I'm going to be at a show tonight, the second show.
Cool.
Yeah, you know Henry Burris, quarterback for the Ottawa Red Blacks?
Yeah.
Super Bowl, Grey Cup hero. He'll be there as well.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, he's interested in seeing. He's bringing some buddies, so
awesome.
we'll be there. And
Oh,
I
that's
can't
so
wait to see you,
cool.
man. Thanks a lot. That
Cool.
was
All right. Thanks
a
for
great
having
time.
me.
Yeah, nice to meet you. That's beautiful, man.
Are you doing a spot or?
I don't think so.
No.
My wife and I.
Okay.
are gonna go.